One that we did in Hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out this evening on a cold day. For those of you who don't know me, although I think you know almost everyone here, my name is Caitlin Monroe-Seiler and I am the Stewardship Coordinator with Prairie Conservation Action Plan, or PCAP for short. And our organization is actually a non-profit, and we're a subcommittee of the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association, and we host in-person presentations as well as webinars as part of our Native Prairie Speaker Series. So we travel around to different communities in rural Saskatchewan, and I was like being close to home. Makes it easy. Hi, welcome, have a seat. So today, Conrad Jaeger, I keep wanting to say Jaeger because I'm learning German, but from Grasslands National Park, we'll be talking about reptiles and amphibians. But before we begin, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations and communities, past and present. For millennia, they have worked to protect these landscapes and the life these areas sustain. I'd like to thank these original caretakers and acknowledge the ongoing work and presence of Indigenous peoples in Canada today. I'd also like to invite everyone to join our Native Prairie Speaker Series online as well. We have one coming up on December 12th about monarchs and native plants. It should be really interesting, by Nature Saskatchewan. And save the date, January 25th will be our first webinar for 2024, and it'll be about burrowing owls in Alberta by Stefano Riccioli, now of Alberta Environment and Parks, but I think most of us know him from down here. And as always, you can register for our webinars on the PCAP website. And I'd like to take a moment to note that financial support for today's presentation is provided by Environment and Climate Change Canada and in-kind support from Grasslands National Park. So a bit about today's presenter. Conrad is a wildlife biologist with Grasslands, and he primarily works on at-risk species, snakes, lizards, and frogs. Conrad is from Cochrane, Alberta, and he grew up hunting, fishing, and camping, where he became passionate about the outdoors and wildlife. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of Calgary and a Master of Environmental Science from the University of Toronto. Since graduating, Conrad has worked as a biologist with consulting companies in Northern Alberta and with Parks Canada, in Banff National Park, until he took a position here at Grasslands. So some of his favorite aspects of the job include going to remote places, seeing unique wildlife behavior, and getting to learn from local community members. So with that, I'll pass it over to Conrad.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really honored to be able to present to you. Hopefully I have a good presentation for you. So my talk is called Cold Blood on the Prairies, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the at-risk amphibians and reptiles of Grasslands National Park. So I'll just go over my presentation quickly. I'd like to introduce myself a little bit, although I got a great introduction. Thank you very much, Caitlin. I'm going to talk a little bit about the herp fauna species in Grasslands National Park. I'd like to speak about what species we actually have in grasslands. Which species I actually work on in Grasslands National Park. What their conservation threats are, locally and globally. And what sort of survey methods we use to survey the species we work on. So, as Caitlin mentioned, I'm actually from Cochrane, Alberta. While I was there, I got a really good introduction to the outdoors, and it gave me a pretty good passion for doing things like hiking and climbing. This is a photo taken when I was out in Nepal, going over one of the high passes out there. This is a photo of me and my dad out on Milk River doing some pheasant hunting, which is one of my favorite things to do. So the combination of getting outside and being involved with wildlife has given me a really good introduction into my role. So I've done a whole bunch of different jobs over the years. This is a photo when I was about 19, working as a trail crew member. I think I was moving equipment to the backcountry using a helicopter. I've also worked as a conservation officer, enforcing legislation, collecting park fees, and just informing park visitors. And I've also worked as a wildland firefighter for the Alberta government, for 3 years. I worked in the Rocky Mountain House area as well as up in Fort McMurray, and I worked on the 2016 wildfire up there. In 2016, I graduated from the University of Calgary with a master's, with a major in biology. And in 2018, I finished a master's in environmental science at the University of Toronto. This is a photo of one of the labs we had where I got to learn how to backpack electrofish.
You which? Sorry?
Something called backpack electrofishing. So you literally have like almost a car battery strapped to your back and a pole, and you get in the water and you zap it, and what happens is the fish, it makes their muscles contract and swim towards you and they get stung. So it allows you to really effectively survey aquatic environments.
Okay.
Yeah. After my master's, I worked with Rouge National Urban Park as a student. My roles there were quite diverse, everything from vegetation surveys to bird surveys and amphibians. This is one of the days where we collaborated with the Toronto Zoo to release baby Blanding's turtle, which is an endangered species, into one of our restored wetlands, which was pretty exciting. After that, I took a position in Banff National Park in the aquatics department. This is a photo of me in about 2020, I believe. And we got flown way into the backcountry and hiked up these streams to catch fish using electrofishing and take some genetic samples and characterize the habitat back there. So absolutely dream trips where you get to go see grizzly bears and mountains and get to hike all day. This is a photo of backpack electrofishing. In the stream we're trying to catch West Slope cutthroat trout. So we can take a genetic sample to determine if they could be possible populations for restoration in the front country. So we're looking to see if these fish could be a source population for the recovery of that species. So that's what a typical day in Banff from the aquatics department might have looked like. After that, I got the opportunity to come out to Grasslands National Park, where I work as a resource management officer in the Species at Risk Wildlife Department. This photo was taken this spring out doing some snake surveys at one of our really good hibernaculum sites. Yeah, so next I want to talk a little bit about the herpafaunal species in Grasslands National Park. So in the broad strokes, we have snakes, amphibians, turtles, and lizards. You guys are probably familiar with a lot of these species. For example, that is a prairie rattlesnake. We also have hognose snakes, plains garter snakes, smooth green snakes, eastern yellow belly snakes, and bull snakes. And for amphibians, we have tiger salamanders, plains spade-footed toads, northern leopard frogs, and boreal chorus frogs. This is a photo of a juvenile boreal chorus frogs, and I think it's really cool because you can see just how small they are when they first emerge. We also have western painted turtles. There's some reports of common snapping turtles from way back in the day, but we haven't seen them in a really long time. So if you see a turtle, a common snapping turtle, please let us know.
What are its characteristics visually?
Yeah, see if I can zoom in maybe. So there's a really, I'll bring it to the front. There's a really big, thick carapace, really long claws. It's quite a large turtle, and it's got a kind of a hooked beak to it. The only other turtle species we have is the painted turtle. And that guy has these really distinct yellow lines, and a much bigger underneath shell as well. So they're quite different if you do get the opportunity. These guys are quite aquatic, whereas the snapping turtles tend to be a lot more terrestrial. So it's a really good, interesting factor as well. Cool. Excuse me one moment.
Do you know where they were seen in this area?
I think quite a bit to the south, like towards South Gillespie,
Okay.
and the Frenchman there.
Indeed.
And no blue racer snakes?
I'm not familiar with that. I think that's more of a eastern species.
You? No, he said he's done, of course, he said it's a maybe one before, under some.
Conrad, do you want this chair up there?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
I probably should preface this by saying I'm not a snake, lizard, amphibian expert. I know a few things, but and I have a bit of knowledge, but I wouldn't say I'm the expert by any means. So if I get something wrong, just let me know. Yeah, so there's 12 species of herp fauna in Grasslands National Park, but we don't work on all of them. We work on 3 distinct species. That would be the eastern yellow-bellied racer, the northern leopard frog, and the greater shorthorn lizard. The major reason why we focus on these species is because they're at risk. They've been federally designated as either endangered, threatened, or special concern. Thank you.
And so the elements are not any of the above?
I don't think they are at this time. Does anyone know?
There's a few more that have been very recently, like salamanders, for example.
They are designated.
A special concern.
Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about the eastern yellow-bellied racer in a moment here. I just want to go over quickly the conservation threats to these species. So as you guys probably know, habitat loss is one of the major threats to herp fauna and species at risk all over the world. Turtles, lizards, and snakes are particularly at risk because they tend to be quite site-specific. So for example, if lizards need, amphibians need, they tend to go back to the same breeding sites year after year. And so if you lost that pond or oxbow, it might have a significant impact in their breeding. Also things like snakes, they tend to have the same hibernacula location year after year. So if you lost that through development or other disturbances, they may not have a place to overwinter in the critical periods. Climate change is also a significant threat to these species. For example, greater shorthorn lizards need snow to overwinter. And so if you change either the volume of snow or the timing of the snow periods, they may not be able to overwinter. Also, similarly, if you don't get enough precipitation, so if the frogs don't have enough water to breed in their ponds, or if the rain comes too late in the season, they may not have enough time to conduct their full life cycle. So changes in the climate could have significant impacts on their populations. Another common threat is rodent mortality. You can imagine if a snake is run over, it could have a significant impact to its ability to reproduce or move around the landscape. Diseases are also a significant threat. One of the threats is ranavirus, which is in the photo on the left-hand side here. This is a scanning electron microscope photo of a herp, and you can see the dark circles there. They represent the viral particles. And that's what a frog with ranavirus actually looks like. Chytrid fungus is also a common threat to amphibians. That's another scanning electron microscope photo of the species with chytrid disease.
Can I ask, I don't know if you're gonna have a significant question and answer period later, or
Yeah, sure.
just while we're on it.
You can ask that.
So, what would precipitate a frog or a whole population acquiring a disease like that in one of these?
Yeah.
What are the factors? Just briefly.
Yeah, sure. Invasive species are a common introduction vector. So for example, great question. The African clawed frog was exported globally. It was actually used as a tool for pregnancy testing. Lab techs would take urine from women who were interested if they were pregnant or not, inject it into that frog, and they'd look at the ovary development of that species. And if they saw ovary development within an hour, it could be a positive pregnancy test. So from 1930s to about 1960s, they used this species to for our own needs. Unfortunately, it carried chytrid disease, chytrid fungus. And so as it was exported globally, it moved this disease, which was localized to South Africa, and didn't affect the local species a ton, to pretty much all on pretty much the whole globe.
Is
So
it bacteria, like I guess I'm trying to understand, so it's a fungus.
It lives in the skin of the frog. So yeah, when they moved the frog from South Africa, they basically spread the disease all over. And unfortunately, this frog doesn't show any symptoms, so it's really hard to test for it unless you look the microscope out. It's really common to move it through vegetation. So it's believed that whirling disease, which is a disease of fish, was moved by either the carcass of fish from Montana into southern Alberta, or through mud on the bottom of boots that were from fly fishermen. That's another common way. We're seeing invasive snails and other mollusks moved into water streams from the pet trade. There's a variety of ways that diseases and pathogens get in. Yeah, great question. Good timing. Yeah, another threat is changes to water quality and water volume. You could imagine if you reduce the volume of water in a stream or a river, that could have significant impacts on frogs, amphibians, and other species. The application of pesticide could be a significant impact, as well as changes in water clarity. You can imagine if you're an aquatic species, not being able to see or to breathe could have really big impacts on your ability to survive and reproduce. Because these threats are significant and quite impactful, we need robust monitoring programs to track the environmental conditions that we're seeing, as well as to understand the population dynamics of these species. Which is why Grasslands National Park has some really great monitoring programs. So we'll start off by talking about eastern yellow-bellied racers and the snake survey protocol that we have. So racers are a non-venomous snake. They forage in mixed grass prairie and sagebrush thickets, and the vegetation is really helpful for them to be able to sneak up on their prey. They're an interesting species because they can actually move 7 kilometers per hour, which is really fast for a snake, which is roughly the walking speed of a horse. Which is why they're called a racer. The adults mainly prey on rodents, amphibians, birds, and reptiles. This is also a photo of an eastern yellow-bellied racer, just a juvenile. They have a really distinctive color morph that makes them pretty hard to see in that sort of vegetation.
These guys turn green?
Yeah, so this is the adult, this is the juvenile.
Can you go back to the adult again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and their eyes change color.
I don't know if this is true, but I wonder if the juveniles look a little bit like rattlesnakes to reduce the likelihood of predation. I wouldn't want to come anywhere close to that. Yeah, so racers sexually mature at approximately 3 years of age, live to 7 to 8 years. They mate in spring and lay approximately 8 eggs per year. Those eggs hatch in August. The juveniles prey primarily on crickets and grasshoppers and other invertebrates. And they overwinter in animal burrows. It's another photo of that.
Not with animals though, like they would take over the burrow.
I think, generally speaking, it would be the old burrow of like a cottontail hare or something like that. Maybe an old badger bull. Yeah. So the eastern yellow-bellied racer is threatened federally. What that means is it's likely to become an endangered species if nothing is done to reverse the factors leading to its extirpation or extinction. In Canada, there are only 3 river valleys where the species can be found, 2 in Saskatchewan and 1 in Alberta. And in Saskatchewan, that would include the Frenchman and the Rock Creek drainages. So basically the extent of Grasslands National Park. Their estimated population is roughly 10,000 adults, which might sound like a lot, but if you start thinking about isolated populations and pretty high mortality rates, that's actually not a very large number at all. To monitor the population, we go out in the spring using 2 simple methods. We conduct foot surveys, as well as using wildlife cameras. We're mainly looking for the presence or absence of racers at their hibernaculi. And we conduct surveys at these hibernaculi annually on a rotating basis. So if you say there's 30 hibernaculi site that we know of, we might survey a portion of that and then keep going between the sites to get a really good picture of the species as a whole throughout the park. Some of the photos on the right are the equipment we might use. These include the camera traps, simple clipboard and paper, snake gaiters to keep ourselves protected, which is the photo in the middle, binoculars, GPS, and a hiking stick. A hiking stick is actually fairly important for a couple of reasons. It helps us flush the snakes out of the grass so that we can find them, as well as make it less likely we step on them and hurt them or ourselves. This is a photo I took while doing snake surveys this spring. If you look carefully, you can see a prairie rattlesnake in its overwintering den. It's coming out from the den in the springtime when the temperatures are warming up to sun itself on the southern slopes. And then when it cools down, you go back into the den so that it doesn't freeze overnight. This is a photo of one of her dens and a camera trap set up on it. And this is a photo from that actual camera trap. And I think camera traps are really neat because you can see what animals do when you're not there. So if you look really carefully, you'll see 2 different species of snake. There's a plains garter snake and a yellow-bellied racer. You can see what appears to be a snake yawning, which I didn't know they did until we put out these cameras. You can see snakes climbing vertical walls, which I think is incredible considering they don't have hands or feet. And a really sneaky snake at the top left that I would have totally missed if we wouldn't have had a still image. Yeah, so we'll talk next about northern leopard frogs.
That looks like a belly full.
Yeah, this is an awesome photo taken by Nick, if you guys know him, of a northern leopard frog that appears to be eating a rodent, which is pretty crazy. Northern leopard frogs are quite large, at least their adult form. They can be up to 4 inches in length. They have a ton of color variations. They can be sort of grass green all the way to dark brown, and they can have either spots or no spots, so quite a bit of variation. They breed from March until June, and their call is described as a low snore and then several low grunts, or fingers rubbed on a wet balloon. So females lay round egg nests up to 5,000 eggs per mass, and they're usually attached to vegetation. It's a really cool photo of, or video of a leopard frog eating a cricket. Tadpoles largely eat algae, vegetation, and small insects. The adults prey primarily on crickets, flies, worms, and smaller frogs. They tend to breed in ponds or really slow-moving creeks. They move to the upland meadows and native prairie grasses in the summertime to forage for larger prey. And they overwinter in oxygenated water bodies that don't freeze. The western boreal and prairie populations are listed as special concern, which is described as particularly sensitive to human activities or natural events, but are not endangered or threatened. They actually have a really wide distribution, all the way from Newfoundland to British Columbia, but in the 1970s they experienced a pretty steep decline. Scientists don't know why that decline occurred. And interestingly, in Saskatchewan, their distribution is largely unknown and undocumented. So this survey effort goes a long way to understanding the species in Saskatchewan. So we've started conducting northern leopard frog surveys. We've done a 2-year pilot project study to look at the effectiveness of surveying them. Step 1 is to conduct a call survey in the spring, where we listen for males in the ponds during the May period. Thankfully, they have a really high breeding site fidelity, so they tend to come back to the same site year after year. And this gives us relative timing for the other steps. Step 2 is looking for egg map surveys. So we go out in the daytime between May and June and look for these big clumps of eggs. They tend to be pretty close to where the adult males were calling, so it's really nice that we have that call survey previously to know where to look. After the eggs hatch, tadpoles take approximately 2.5 months to metamorphose into adults. Interestingly, in droughts, they metamorphose faster and with smaller body size, suggesting that wetter conditions are helpful for their survival. The next step is conducting adult surveys. We go out in July through August to look for the adults. There's 2 main sites that we look in. Upland ponds, about within 1.6 kilometers of the river. And we walk the edges to see if we can flush the frogs out, which we can count and collect some data on. We also look in the river systems. We break the Frenchman River into thirds and survey 1/3 per year. In that third of the river, we randomly select points on the river and survey 100-meter sections downstream of that.
This is just within Grasslands National Park.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, in the Frenchman. The way we do it in the rivers is we get in a canoe and try to paddle from really high-quality habitat patch to high-quality habitat patch and spook them either with the canoe or a paddle. And that way we can, they're really hard to see when they're standing still, but if they move, they're quite easy to see. So if we flush them, we can get a really good idea of how many and what species. We're primarily looking for presence and absence, but relative abundance data is also really useful for us. This is a map of the southern sites. You can see the red dots near the river, or where we survey. This is a photo I took this July out conducting surveys. It's one of my favorite things to survey in the park because you get to get out and paddle and be in the beautiful day. This is what you might see on the bank, a ton of frogs. And they can be kind of hidden if you don't look really, really carefully. And this year, it was really exciting. We had detections of northern leopard frogs at each one of our survey locations, so that's really promising. Next, I'd like to talk about the greater shorthorn lizard. This is a video from National Geographic on a really closely related regal horned lizard that uses some pretty interesting strategies.
You're about to witness one of the most bizarre pieces of defensive weaponry ever devised by Mother Nature. Has there ever been a real use of an ice bucket? Or of blood? This bloody lizard lives near saguaro trees in the Sonoran Desert in Mexico. A bird drops saguaro fruit for the harvester ants to munch on. And in turn, the regal horned lizard munches on the ants. The ants make it their business to fight back, looking for a chink in the lizard's body armor. Unfortunately for the ants, the regal horned lizard has a sticky tongue with pretty good aim, and it's immune to ant venom. And its body can actually get all the moisture it needs from the ants, which make up 90% of its diet. Just as the ants are stalked by the lizard is stalked by a coyote, the next link on the food chain. The coyote is fast, deft, and determined. The lizard finally has a reason to deploy its doomsday weapon. That swelling below the lizard's eye isn't a tear duct. It's high-octane coyote repellent, aka blood. Let her rip. Blood pressure builds up to the point where the lizard can actually shoot blood out of its eye with the precision aim of a sharpshooter. And yes, it's nothing more than plain old blood. The coyote wisely retreats to find a less feisty meal. Game, set, match. Victory to the blood-squirting regal horned lizard.
Yeah, so I think it's a pretty cool video to sort of introduce you to shorthorn lizards. They're really neat, and they do some really unique things. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about their basic biology. They overwinter in sheltered areas with snowbanks.